So, James, you want to tell us a little bit about the race and what's going on with you now after the race?
I don't know. I mean, the race was kind of discouraging in the sense that if you're a Republican, you're beginning to develop the sense in Oregon that you're pursuing a role like Don Quixote. And so I think I've been doing some very hard thinking about what the Republican Party ought to do to maybe overcome the brand damage that it has suffered. And because the country needs an alternative, the country needs a party that can tell the truth and not be sort of one of two wings of the same bird of prey that's eating us alive. Well, the problem is here in Portland, and the problem is that for whatever reason, only 1 out of every 4 or 5 voters in Portland is willing to vote Republican, and people need to figure out why that is. Particularly, for example, the Multnomah County Republican Party needs to figure out why that is, and what is it that is so repellent about Republicans for people from Portland? I mean, I don't fully understand it. I think that
that's right.
I think that there's a lot of people who have their heads filled with myths about what Republicans are and what it would mean if they were elected and how awful it would be, and it would be the end of the world as we know it. And it's very difficult to even come to grips with this stuff because some of it is just not reality based at all.
Republicans are going to have a better grip on things. They're going to be more responsible on everything they deal with.
They've damaged themselves, though, by spending like drunken sailors, too. You know, I mean, you have a situation now where the country's flat broke. It now has to print up half the money. It won't collect in taxes what it needs to spend, so it just prints the money out of thin air and robs the people by whoever gets the money first wins, you know, because it's printed money and everybody else is robbed. And we're living on borrowed money and we're living on borrowed time, and we have these people back in Washington who are just, I think Mark Stein said they spent 2 months arguing over 10 minutes worth of spending. And that's not a serious approach to governance. And the Republicans are a little better than the Democrats in that regard, but they're not being the virtuous examples they need to be. Now, of course, they don't want to be because it's always unpopular to be the person who says, you know, well, it's time to take away the punch bowl, it's time to live within our means, it's time to live within the budget. You can't have $1 trillion budget deficit because people who are addicted to fantasy world think, why not, you know? Now they're out there saying, oh, we can solve all our problems. Let's just print a little coin made out of platinum worth $1 trillion, and the Treasury will deposit it in the Fed, and then the Fed will have $1 trillion. Everything will be fine, you know? And these people are like dangerous lunatics, but they're members of the House, they're members of the Senate,
right.
They're Nobel Prize winning economists, and they're dangerously, you know, dangerous lunatics. Well, their salaries depend on not seeing the problem at some level. I mean, they are afraid to tell the truth. So I don't know. I mean, I have hope for the Republican Party because I think we can pick people, Republicans, to stand up and tell the truth, and eventually people will wake up, you know, and say, gosh, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe there aren't unicorns running through the forest, you know, emitting little $1 trillion coins out of whatever orifice. I mean, it's people have got to wake up. This is very serious stuff. We're in the end game here.
You know, when you're
those are the two choices. Either the interest rates rise to some massive amount, or they just start printing money like mad, and it's Weimar Germany all over again. And people are going to, there's just a great deal of suffering already baked in. And the sick thing about it is the longer they wait to bring things back into balance, the worse the balancing process is going to be. It's not inflation yet, because what they've been doing is they've been taking these hundreds of billions of dollars and they've been giving them to their friends and the too big to fail banks, and the banks have been out there gambling with them, and nobody's bought anything in the real world yet. With this money's just piling up in the coffers of Goldman Sachs and Wells, you know, whatever.
Solyndra, things like that.
Yeah, it's just they're printing it. Just Solyndra, oh, have 50 billion here, 50 billion there. The real issue is that because we're not voting the old-fashioned way, and because everything is so heavily computerized now, you can sort of do anything with computers. And as she says, every time someone mails a ballot in or puts it in a drop box, official or unofficial, somebody who had the code can figure out who that was. You know, the thing that makes me the most suspicious is every election we have these armies of people out on the streets soliciting people to register to vote.
Yeah,
and they
that's
get a
true.
copy of the registration, they get a copy of the voter's signature, they know everything they need to know to cast a valid vote for that person. They have everything they need except the ballot. So, you know, who knows what's going on? There isn't really a lot of monitoring. I don't know if it's as significant here as it is in many other states. I mean, we hear these reports from back east of precinct after precinct after precinct, 99.9 Obama, 99.9 Obama, 99. I mean, these are not realistic percentages. You know, communist Stalin, Castro can't get those kind of percentages.
Right. And 59, what was it, 59 precincts didn't have a single Romney vote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's just
not
ridiculous.
possible.
It's not possible.
yeah.
And so,
It's not possible.
More interesting things about that. I mean, you would think if they're going to order ballots for an election, they'd order the ballots from the company, the ballots would ship in November. But as of a week or two ago, I think, the Multnomah County people still couldn't give us the bill from the printing company showing how many ballots had been ordered.
okay.
And they're like, well, maybe the bill will come later, you know. And these are not, you know, you can't put your finger on anything really wrong with that,
You
except
gotta know about ballots.
What private company issues an invoice 3 or 4 months after they've provided the product?
in that case that you watched, we went through the exercise of attempting to account for the blank ballots, and we came out with them ordering a whole lot more ballots than they needed, shipping out a whole lot more ballots than they needed, having a whole lot left over, and the numbers just didn't add up at all. And you probably heard them tell the judge, oh, we'll account for it. And so now we've got a pile of documents that have just come in from the county, and we'll look and we'll see if they did a better job this time. But you know, last time around, they didn't do any kind of job at all about accounting for it. And when he's up on the witness stand and we ask him, well, how do you explain the fact that the count is off by about 5,000? Well, I can't explain it. They did the count. Maybe they counted wrong.
What do you see
Really
as the
aren't.
problems with vote by mail?
Well, I think that is the problem, that you, the polling place, you go in there, you're alone, you know, there's all these rules about nobody can come within so many feet of the entrance of the polling place, and all of that protection of this individual decision is lost in favor of the convenience. Now, people can, in theory, still say, yeah, I'm going to sit in the privacy of my own home and vote that way, and the people who capitulate to some sort of social pressure to go to a ballot party or whatever, that's, you know, that's unfortunate. I don't know. It's a problem.
What about the 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks that shenanigans can go on because they're getting they're tallying them up.
Yeah.
They start counting them 8 days in advance.
There's a wonderful study, you know, you can, because different states have different rules, you can compare using econometric techniques the degree of sort of massacres or whatever in states that allow concealed carries and ones that don't. And there is a powerful and statistically significant relationship between states that allow concealed carry are safer states. And so if you wanted to do one thing, you know, if you let the, because, you know, and this is again, we're back to this unicorns and fairy dust stuff. I mean, there are countries like Israel that had problems with terrorists coming and shooting the kids in a school. And the solution is simple. You know, they would have at least one teacher or official armed at these schools, and the terrorist attacks on schools stopped, because when the terrorists attacked the schools, they got shot, and the problem was solved. And in Switzerland, you also have a very high degree of firearms spread out in nearly every household, and very low incidence of any type of problem. And so really, if you think about it, the solution of Israel and Switzerland is we're going to have trained and competent people all over the place having guns, and the crazy people are not allowed to have guns. Whereas the solution of the Democrats is let's make sure the competent and law-abiding people don't have any guns, and the only people who have guns are the criminals and the crazy people who disobey the laws. You know, which one works better? Again, it's not rocket science.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
You know Art Robinson?
No.
Well, James got to know him. Tell us everybody a little bit about Art.
He ran for Congress down in southwest Oregon against DeFazio, and put in a pretty good showing. What was most impressive about him is he actually went out and wrote a book, Common Sense, in 2012, and mailed out like 160,000 copies of this book to all these voters. Yeah, and he had a very formidable ground game, I would say. He had innovations in his campaign that I've never seen anywhere else, like the lawn signs. There were iterations of the lawn signs with evolving messages, and just a tremendous ground game, and a very good person. I've followed his career for years. And he has this book. You know, if Oregonians would read this book, they would learn an awful lot. But one of the tragic problems we have is we have voters with very low attention spans and who are sort of massively ignorant. I mean, it's a real problem to take on a duty as a voter and to influence the direction of the country when you're sort of ignorant of all history, economics, and knowledge, and you wind up picking, well, this one looks better, or he's cooler, or whatever than that. That's sort of dangerous in terms of the direction of the country. And I think that people don't see, it's like if you don't know history, you're like, you think you're the leaf, but you're part of a tree, and fall is coming, or whatever. You know, people don't have a very limited perspective because the schools have just dumbed them down so massively compared to the degree of education there used to be. I mean, I think you look at these old tests from elementary school, the 8th graders back at the turn of the last century, or you know, they knew as much as college graduates know now, you know, in terms of simple problems. And part of the job of the Republicans or anybody who's interested in making a difference politically is to educate people and to counter misinformation too. I think Ronald Reagan once said it's not even what they don't know that's so much of the problem, it's that they know so much that isn't so.
I know, I think I read that. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, I saw this when we went to speak to the Black Chamber of Commerce, and I talked a little bit about the history of the Republicans, and you know, the first black senator is Republican, the second black senator is Republican, there's now another black senator that's a Republican. The Republicans have been leading civil rights all the way up until about 1964, when the question of civil rights changed from sort of fairness in public sector stuff to regulating private conduct much more intrusively, and then there was sort of a split. But all of the people I talked to were convinced that the Republicans were the party of the racists, and one of the worst was Ronald Reagan, because he had gone down and given a speech in this county seat near where these two civil rights workers were murdered, and that speech was a code that the Republicans were going to go back to the days when they were murdering civil rights workers. You know, later on I went back and I read the transcript of Reagan's speech, which is 40 miles away from where this had happened, which is at this fairgrounds where all the politicians go and speak, and so the amount of sort of lies and distortions that have been carefully built up over the years against the Republicans are massive, and I don't know exactly what it's going to take to undo them. I'm not ready to give up on the Republicans.
No.
We have a situation where the nation is sort of rotting from the head on down, and the leadership of both the Republican and Democratic parties are sending us over the abyss here. And so if there's going to be any renewal, it's going to come from the bottom up, and we have to give people the sense that that's worth doing and it can make a difference. And that's part of what I'd like to focus on in the coming years. So. It's been an interesting discussion. I think there are serious issues of election fraud that need to be considered on a variety of levels, and we need to tighten the system up. You know, it's remarkable that in many states they're having fights about whether people have to identify themselves when they're voting, and this is also sort of a fundamental requirement across the world, except when it gets in front of federal judges who think it discriminates in some way because they're lunatics. And here in Oregon, you don't have to show ID at all. You sign something, you send it in, the thing comes. You could be anybody. You could be Donald Duck, you know. And there's no, and that's not a serious system. That's not a system that's worthy of Oregon at some level. That has to be tightened up at some level. And on the gun control issue, again, it's the same thing. This is not rocket science. You know, the people who are acting to destroy the Second Amendment are acting emotionally. They're not acting rationally. And they're not really even acting fairly. You know, if they want to say, let's bring on a motion and a resolution to repeal the Second Amendment, you know, fine. But this business of, oh, we're only going to do this, and we're only going to do this, and we're only going to do this, it's dishonest. It's dishonest. We have a large movement in the federal courts until it got shot down in the Supreme Court that the right of the people to bear arms doesn't even mean a right that any person has, you know. Oh, no, we don't see that there at all because we're blind, you know. And now we have a 1-vote margin on the Supreme Court that believes there's an individual right to hold guns. And so we have 4 members of the Supreme Court who are fundamentally incompetent to be Supreme Court justices. And this is a dangerous situation. And so the situation is fraught with danger. The people of Oregon and the people of this country need to wake up and get involved and turn this thing around, because there are people who want to turn this country into Venezuela because they're going to be buddies with the new Chavez and they're going to get something for nothing. That's not a model that works.